Just to check if the sound is okay, Edin.
People hear me?
Yes, we hear you well, Ulrich. Yes.
Yeah,
everybody. Okay, great. Sorry, I was waiting for the let's say order to start. I see here, yeah, the event program says opening remarks 105. So, Eileen, should we start? I guess I should start. Sorry. So, let me start, assuming you can all hear me. So, thank you very much for joining. I understand we have in total 800 people listening. We have been waiting now for this to really start, and we have people from 40 countries and 400 different institutions. So it's good to see that we have people from 40 countries, because this is about cross-border payments. And it relates to what we announced a few days ago, that we would, a few days ago in October actually, that we would initiate cross-border payments with tips, linking tips in different ways, both in Europe and beyond. And within Europe, we would do it with in tips, in the sense that tips, currencies on tips would be interlinked. And then we would, however, go beyond that also to the rest of the world. And we will go, of course, into more details in this session. And yeah, as it has been noted many times, cross-border payments are slow, complex, and expensive, and that affects wholesale payment and corporate payments, and also retail payments like remittances, for example. So it affects many people, everyone who has any cross-border relationship or travels. And one would have expected that with electronic communication costs falling, also global payments would get cheaper and cheaper, but they didn't. So there's really a kind of flat movement of fees in particular, which didn't come down over the last years. Why is that so? Certainly because of legal complexity. If a payment crosses jurisdictions, you have to take into account two legal frameworks and the way they treat cross-border payments, compliance, legal risks. There have been fines in the past of banks who did overlook AML CFT duties. So then banks are, of course, very careful. There has been a de-risking phenomenon where banks have been withdrawing from corridors. And of course, the, let's say, geopolitical situation, the international collaboration has not necessarily improved after the Russian invasion in Ukraine in 2022. We are not really in a world which gets better in that respect, or at least we have to work on it. Then another aspect is operations. So if you do cross-border payments, you may face different operating hours. You may have, insufficient message formats which don't allow to do straight-through processing in cross-border payments. So there's a lot of work ongoing, of course, on ISO 20022 deployment to improve, let's say, the automation via better, more complete message formats for cross-border payments. And interlinking fast payment system also falls under those operational solutions. And obviously, because fast payment systems are 24/7, they have no issue of non-overlapping operating hours. And the first topic, of course, specific to cross-border payments is FX conversion. FX cross-currency payments don't really exist. They are always decomposed to domestic payments, where one FX convergent agent has to do the FX conversion. And that can be more or less efficient and more or less organized. And the interlinking of FPS also have to look, of course, at how this FX conversion is being done. And noting all that, the G20 launched an ambitious agenda to improve cross-border payments. That was in 2020. And in 2022, it also formulated quantitative targets for 2027, including for speed and cost. Now we are somewhere in the middle in end 2024. So we have another 3 years to reach those targets. But as it appears, the, let's say, trend towards those targets is still not such that we would easily reach them. So more efforts are needed. And the Eurosystem has supported the G20 roadmap from the beginning. And also the fact that interlinking fast payment systems was identified as one of few priority actions in 2022. And as we have been running TIPS for now many years, one could almost say, and as TIPS is well connected, also serves as hub in the euro area and has this multi-currency ability. For all those reasons, the Council thought that the ECB, the Eurosystem, should contribute with TIPS to the interlinking of fast payment systems, so act as an operator and contribute to better cross-border payments. And here we are doing that, and that will be explained in more detail. It was already also in the press release, in the announcements, that we first will do it with the TIPS hosted currencies. So as you know, the Swedish krona is on TIPS also, and the Danish krona will be on TIPS as of April next year, so in half a year actually. And you may have seen that last week Norway also announced it will join TIPS, presumably in 2028. So that's a bit more remote, but in principle, the cross currency would apply to all those, or would be available for all those who want, who have joined TIPS. So yeah, that work actually started already a while ago. There was already an announcement to work on this with Sweden, I think in 2020. But okay, priority had been to migrate the Swedish market to TIPS. That happened in early 2024, so this year. And so some work has been done on the interlinking, also even with PSPs. We had some discussions with PSPs on the design, but this work will be intensified now as the migration has taken place, went smoothly, and yeah, we now, let's say, upgrade this work. And the second really new element in our October announcement was the global interlinking of TIPS. So to go beyond Europe, so go beyond TIPS itself, interlink with other fast payment systems. And this has three, let's say, sub-pillars. One is to connect TIPS with other fast payment systems outside the euro area that have compatible schemes without, establishing a direct technical link. So this would rely essentially on the European side, on the one leg out scheme. Exploiting, let's say, the capacity of the one leg out scheme in using TIPS for improving cross-border payments with specific focus on then some currencies. The second is to connect with Nexus, the BIS Innovation Hub project that is advancing towards implementation. And here the promise is that with a multilateral arrangement, one can, of course, have economies of scale and scope. Every currency, let's say, needs to achieve only once its compatibility of its technical connection to Nexus, and then achieves, to have cross-border payments with all those countries and currencies. And as you may have seen in the announcements of Nexus, there will be four ASEAN countries and India at the beginning in Nexus, and we are still then in an exploration phase, but hope then to join also this group very soon. And then last but not least, the ECB announced to go also for bilateral link with India's UPI because of the, let's say, large, of course, market. The Indian market is large, the payment volumes are large, and the experience of India in this field is, let's say, far-reaching. India has established a few such bilateral links, and UPI is also a very successful, instant-based payment solution in India, so that we believe that this is an economically very meaningful link to establish. So today we will have a number of presentations all around this TIPS interlinking. So we will have first my colleague Dimitri Patin, who will give more detailed background and an overview of those different pillars. Then we will have Christina Weishammer and Peter Storgard from the Swedish and Danish central banks, respectively. They will obviously give more insights into their considerations on joining TIPS and having the TIPS, let's say intra-TIPS cross-border payment functionality within those three currencies. And then we will have afterwards a session with Andrea Di Martina from Banca d'Italia, who will provide deeper, let's say, technical introduction to cross-currency payments with TIPS. As you know, Banca d'Italia is running TIPS on behalf of the Eurosystem. And then finally, Jean-Clément will present the, let's say, coming steps in terms of market involvement and explain our call for interest to participate in activities like testing the cross-currency settlement service. So that's all, and let me stop and wish you a fruitful event. We very much hope also for your questions via the chat or email. And the slides will be made available on the ECB website after the event. So don't hesitate to reach out, ask questions during the meeting or afterwards via email, and we will come back to you. So with that, I would thank you and hand over to Dimitri.
Oh, thank you very much, Ulrik. So I think I am back on and people can hear me now. So that helps a lot. Can speak all I want if no one hears me. So thank you very much, Ulrik, for introducing here. Super exciting topic we have ahead of us, cross-border payments. So with that, we just want to briefly do a few intro practical infos on top of Ulrik's introduction here. So today we are diving into this topic. There's two ways of you all to interact with us. As Ulrik mentions, most of you will be in the WebEx. Some of you are watching us via the live stream. If you're facing any difficulties in the WebEx, like myself before, I would advise you to move into the live stream. We'll just show you the QR code on the slides here. And then you can just scan the QR code, take a photo of that if that might be handy a little bit later in case you're suddenly facing difficulties, you never know. So then from there, you can always move into the live stream and watch it. And as Ulrik mentions, the whole recording will be made available afterwards on the website, so you can watch it again or any of the sessions that you are particularly interested in addition to all the slides that we will show today. And as we also mentioned, we really encourage you to to engage with us. We have heard from other sessions, focus sessions that we do, that you like to be involved. So we are posting some questions for you. Some of you already filled in some icebreaker questions at the beginning. You will see them here on the screen. You can again just scan the QR code. If you scan the QR code, it will be taken to some questions. We encourage you to fill those in. They're really just like multiple choice, super simple. Just click and post, and you'll be done in 30 seconds. They're super valuable for us. They help us improve how we do these sessions. We'll be doing them a few times throughout the event. So now you have the opportunity to fill those in. Later on in the middle of the event, we will do a few. And then at the end, we really encourage you to do this. It's 30 seconds of your life. Super valuable, and we will make sure that we will optimize then afterwards so that the sessions continue to be exactly how you want them to be. Also, you would have the opportunity to propose question or other sessions. And now to the questions. So you can either send questions via the chat. So that's of course, for the ones who are in the WebEx. You can see it here. So post questions in the chat, and we'll try to pick some of those up throughout the event. We do know, however, so a disclaimer to start off with, that sometimes you guys are very, very eager on this, and you post a lot of questions, so we may not have time to answer all of them. But please, shoot them to us, and we will try to take as many on board as possible. For the ones in the live stream, you can also send us questions. Use the email that you see on the screen right now. So it's mip.events@ecb.europa.eu. Take a photo of that. You can hear that's a complicated email address. You may forget that later. So just grab your phone, take a photo so you have it for later. And that's about it. So we are a number of people here behind. So my name is Aylin, and a number of us are here to support you today. So really post the questions you have. Send that to us. We try to pick up as much as possible throughout the event. And with that, we can already move to the next session, which is Dimitri. So Dimitri Patan, over to you. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you, Aylin. I hope that you hear me well. Is that the case?
We hear you. Perfect.
And I'm also happy that you're back, Aylin, indeed.
Thank you.
And then also good afternoon to everyone. Ulrich just informed us about the G20 roadmap and the relevance of the interlinking of fast payment systems to enhance cross-border payments. And it's true that today cross-border payments are slow, they lack transparency, and they are expensive. And the interlinking of fast payment system is seen as a promising avenue to improve that. And I will try to explain, I have a few slides for that. I will try to explain how within the Eurosystem we came to the decision to implement a cross-currency capability in TIPS, and also what is our roadmap for that. The high-level elements were already mentioned by Ulrich. So if we move to the slide 2, indeed, the first element to take into consideration is that TIPS from the outset is designed to support the settlement of instant payments in multiple currencies. If you allow a small parenthesis, TIPS is not the only target services designed to support that. We also have T2S in the fields of security settlement and T2 for large value payments. T2S is already settling in Danish krona on top of the euro, and T2 will do the same as from April next year. So you see the multi-currency dimension of the target services is quite deep in our DNA. Coming back to TIPS, TIPS is already settling instant payments in Swedish krona since February this year. As mentioned already, the Danish krona will join in April next year, so it's coming. And indeed, I'm also proud to share with you that the Norwegian Central Bank and the ECB have signed what we call a Currency Participation Agreement, or CPA, last week for the onboarding of the Norwegian krona. From that perspective, the slide, the small reference to NOK on the right-hand side is not up to date. We have a target date that is Q1 2028. And also Iceland has expressed an interest in joining TIPS, and we have already started the assessment of their onboarding. So the first element that brought us to the cross-currency is the multi-currency capability of TIPS. The second element is that TIPS is already positioned as the backbone for the pan-European reach for instant payments in euro. Some of you may recall that in 2022, the Eurosystem implemented in TIPS the so-called reachability measures. And those two measures implemented at that time have secured that any PSP participating in any ACH within the euro area is able to reach any other PSP participating in any other ACH via TIPS. And it's when we combine those two elements, so on one hand the reachability, but also the multiple currency capability of TIPS, it became clear that TIPS is in a unique position to facilitate end-to-end instantaneity of cross-border payments, at least for the currencies present in TIPS. The fact that we are settling on the same platform, and that element allows establishing a tight link of the two legs of a cross-currency payment to the point that the payment can be made instant end-to-end. This also means that the settlement risk is eliminated, and typically when the risk is lower, there is also a legitimate expectation that the costs will go down. And therefore, we believe that this initiative of implementing cross-currency in TIPS fits perfectly with the objective set by the G20 to enhance cross-border payments. I have to say that the colleagues have added at the bottom of the slide the fact that TIPS delivers excellent performance in terms of latency and resilience. Of course, this is correct, but I'm not sure that this is fully relevant to explain why we have decided to proceed with the implementation of a cross-currency capability in TIPS. If we move to the next slide, well, I have focused so far on the intra-TIPS cross-currency instant payments, but there is another flavor to it, and that is the ability to support the interlinking with other fast payment systems. As shown on the slides, the roadmap that was approved by the Governing Council covers both the implementation of a cross-currency capability in TIPS for the TIPS-hosted currency, as we say, but also for the interlinking with other fast payment systems. This is now our mandate. Obviously, the first part, so the cross-currency between the currencies hosted in TIPS, is our prime focus. It is also slightly easier to implement. As I just explained, we have a good level of control technically on the two legs, and we also have the ability to process them literally as one unit of work in the system. Also, the schemes developed by the EPC, so the European Payments Council, and the NPC, the Nordics Payment Council, are traditionally very close from each other. And there is good hope that this will be the same between the OCT-in scheme of the EPC and the one to be established by the NPC. Still, this is for the intra-TIPS, but we are also being mandated to progress on the interlinking with other fast payment systems. And in this respect, we plan to leverage on the new settlement model that we implement with this, with the first parts to support this interlinking. And as already mentioned by Ulrich, in our mandate, we will work both on the establishment of bilateral links, but also on multilateral links. If we move to the next slides, we have articulated our roadmap around three distinct phases. The first phase consists of partially implementing the one-leg-out scheme of the EPC. More concretely, we will amend the messages related to the instant payment flows, that is the PAX 8 and the PAX 2, and the investigation, that's the PAX 28, as prescribed by the one-leg-out scheme of the EPC. Strictly speaking, this is not yet interlinking, as the implementation still requires the intervention of an intermediary bank to process the second leg with the other fast payment system. Therefore, this phase does not provide certainty on the instant execution of the payment end-to-end. It is planned for June 2025, and our position is more that this is a technical step which will serve as a stepping stone for the second phase. And so I move now to the box in the middle, the phase 2. And the phase 2 is the implementation of the cross-currency capability in TIPS-hosted currencies. And as explained earlier, we will implement a settlement model, a new settlement model, whereby we link the two legs of the cross-currency payment in TIPS so that we can guarantee instantaneity end-to-end. The technical rollout of this second phase is scheduled for October next year. You see our tentatively. It is not for the technicality, because the change request is now scheduled for October. The tentative dimension is more related to the business rollout of the solution. And my colleague, Andrea Di Martina, will walk you through the model later in the afternoon. And beyond that, our strategy is also to cover a third phase, which is a cross-platform interlinking. And here we believe again that the model that we implement with the phase 2 will help us for the cross-platform interlinking. Of course, we believe that the multilateral setups, like the one proposed by Nexus, has the potential to offer significant synergies and to open up for more corridors. but it is fair to say that the governance in these multilateral setups is more complex. Today, I can share with you that we have already started formal talks with Nexus, and we will assess the possibility to join that setup. And as said earlier, we will also assess the feasibility of establishing bilateral links. And in this respect, as mentioned by Ulrich already, we have started working with the NPCI, so the National Payment Corporation in India, because NPCI is operating one of the largest, if not the largest, fast payment system on earth, and it is called UPI. And obviously, the timing for this third phase for multilateral and bilateral interlinking is more uncertain, it's more uncertain than the previous ones. Currently, we are targeting the end of 2026 or the 2027, but we should have more visibility on this in the course of next year. So to summarize, we have already positioned TIPS as the vehicle to support instant payments in Euro across the ecosystem of PSPs and ACHs. And our ambition now is to extend this to the other currencies in TIPS. And here I would like to tell you or to report to you that we have an outstanding collaboration with the central banks that have already decided to use TIPS. This is going very well. We have regular coordination meetings, and we are progressing at quite a high pace. And last but not least, in terms of ambition, we want to position TIPS as the natural conduits or hub, if you like, for instant payments beyond the boundaries of TIPS. This is obviously the phase 3. At the bottom of the slide, you can see that we will also assess, as part of phase 3, the opportunity to bring further enhancements, for instance, in the context of the FX determination. But at the current juncture, I'm not really in a position to provide you more detail with this. We need to work a bit more before sharing on that. Moving on to the next slide. So what's next? So after summer, we have received the green light from the Governing Council on the roadmap, as I just explained. We have already progressed quite nicely with the definition of the new settlement model to support cross-currency settlement. And we have started already the implementation of phases 1 and 2. The necessary change requests for that have been prepared and approved for implementation. Going forward, we will, of course, continue our close dialogue with the industry. We have several focus sessions. We had several focus sessions already. We have this one, and we have also entered into a more technical dialogue on the subject. And we will further intensify our market outreach activities. And Jean-Clément will explain that later today, we will explain how we intend to proceed concretely. So with this, I thank you for the attention. I think, Eileen, that we can move to the next point on the agenda, which is a fireside chat with the colleagues from Sweden and Denmark. But before that, maybe we can take a few questions from the audience.
Thank you, Dimitri, very much. So that was the first start of the introduction to what will happen in TIPS with the cross-currency. We already see that some of you are very technical on your questions. Hold it, there will be more. We're not done for today. So some of the questions that are ticking in now, we will propose to hold, because I think we're going to tackle them a little bit later on in the afternoon, so they would fit better there, and you might even be answered just via the presentations. So I agree with you, Dimitri, that I think we would move straight into the fireside chat now, and we have just left the email here to respond to in case you have questions. So put them in the chat, or again, send it via an email. And then I would really invite the two external speakers as well here. We have Christina Weishammer and Peter Storgård. And over to you, Dimitri, to introduce the two of them. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you, Eileen. And I'm a bit embarrassed because your pronunciation is much better than mine. So for this fireside chat, I'm delighted, of course, to have Christina and Peter with me. Christina Wildtrouw-Weschhammer is the head of payment departments at the Zwerige Riksbank, where she's been active for over 20 years and have a wealth of expertise in that area. And today, Christina is also leading the department where the cross-currency work is conducted. And next to her, virtually, we have Peter Storgaard, who is the assistant governor in Denmark, and he's also head of the financial stability in the Denmark National Bank. Peter has also spent, I think, 20 years or more in the central bank in Denmark. And since 2021, he is the head of the financial stability department, performing tasks such as financial regulation, oversight, and payment systems. And as mentioned previously, both by Ulrich and myself, TIPS is a multi-currency system, today settling in euro and in Swedish krona. And from April next year, it will also include the Danish krona, as the Denmark's National Central Bank is set to join TIPS. And with these three currencies on board, and actually more to come, as you heard, Norway, the Norwegian krona, and probably Iceland joining at some point in time, there is a strong business case for the implementation of such cross-currency service amongst the TIPS hosted currencies. And today I want to discuss the opportunities that you see of the cross-currency services from your market perspective. And again, thank you to both of you for joining. And let's start with the first question. Maybe I should have started by asking if we can hear you well, Christina and Peter. Can you say a word?
Yes, good afternoon.
Okay, good afternoon, Christina and Peter.
And good afternoon from my side as well.
Good afternoon. So my first question will be to both of you. So can you please elaborate on your strategic considerations for joining, well, first TIPS, but also the TIPS cross-currency project? And maybe we can start with Christina.
Yes, sure. Thank you, Dimitri, and thank you for inviting me today to this focus session. So this is a project that we've been working on together for some time now, and it feels relevant, useful, and interesting to reach out to participants in the banking industry as well about this project. And with a large number of participants here today, I interpret there to be a certain interest as well. So our strategic considerations, well, in recent years, also the Riksbank has taken a pretty active role in the international work on improvement cross-border payments, both within the international framework, but also when we realized that with this initiative, we could actually contribute further to this objective in our capacity as a provider of infrastructure services. It felt very natural to team up with you at the ECB, with Banca d'Italia and the National Bank in Denmark later on. And during the project, I would say that the rationale of the service has become stronger, I would say. With the instant payment regulation, for example, a service that facilitates instant payments in euro has been requested by many banks in the Nordics. And adding more currencies, like the Danish one, has obviously made it more attractive as well. And most recently, we've seen commercial use cases in the Nordics that could most likely benefit from such a cross-currency service in TIPS. Now, there will be a more detailed walkthrough of the service later, so I will not go very far along that route, but the whole concept of being able to offer your customers instant payment services in a broad range of currencies from your local TIPS account only should be attractive to many payment service providers, I believe. And then there are the other benefits of the service, which we will be learning about a little later. So that would be my key takeaways, Dimitri.
Yeah, thank you, Christina. And maybe the same question to you, Peter. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Dimitri, and also thank you from my side for the invitation. I'm happy to be here. So as already mentioned, we will join the TIPS in April 25, and also we will also join T2, which is the wholesale payment system in Europe. We'll migrate our GTS system Kronos 2 to target. And just to start with sort of the overall ambition here, it really is from our side to benefit from the efficiency and alignment with international standards that comes out of being part of this common system. We also expect and look forward to being part of a strong community with ensuring IT security and resilience for the Danish financial market. So that's what we hope to get out of being part of T2S, T2, and TIPS from next year. So that's sort of the wider strategic consideration from our side. When it comes to instant payments, this is something we already have in Denmark. It works well. It's efficient. We started 10 years ago in 2014. But this is, of course, still only instant payments in Danish kroner. And we do not yet have instant payments between the Nordic countries and with the euro area. So from the Danish Central Bank side, our goal here is to basically to enable better services to Danish citizens and companies. And that also holds here with respect to cross-border payments. As has already been mentioned, this is often somewhat behind in the development of payments when it comes to service levels being offered to consumers. It is just more difficult with the cross-currency payments. So, but given the multi-currency design of the TIPS platform, the way it's aligned with European standards regulations, we believe that the TIPS cross-currency service is really a very good tool to achieve better payment service to Danish companies, to Danish citizens for these cross-border instant payments. So that's our background for joining this TIPS cross-currency project, and we're very happy to be in the project together with the Riksbank and the ECB. Thanks.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, Peter. You mentioned rightly that in April next year you will be joining for TIPS, but as well for T2. But you forgot to mention that you are already active with the third target service, T2S, for the security settlement in your capacity as central bank already since many years, so since 2018, if I'm not wrong. Thank you to both for your for sharing your views on at the strategic level. Maybe another question to Christina. The Riksbank started settling instant payments in Swedish krona in TIPS since February 2024. And now we are working together on the implementation of the cross-currency functionality. You explained already the high-level vision behind that, but can you share with us a bit more on the use cases that you see for the Nordic in the Nordics for such a service?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we'd be happy to. So just like in Denmark, in Sweden, instant payments has been in use for many years, more than 10. So Swedish citizens are used to using their mobile phone and paying instantly to each other. I'd like to come back to the fact that the TIPS cross-currency is, first of all, an infrastructure service. I'd like to emphasize that. So basically, we are laying down the rails for others, so the payment service providers, to develop the actual services that will be offered to end users, payers, and NPEs. So there will be no benefits to end users unless PSPs show their ability to be innovative based on the cross-currency service in TIPS as a foundation. And here I am optimistic when it comes to use cases. In fact, we've already seen a few commercial offerings or use cases which could leverage on a TIPS cross-currency service, I believe. So what immediately comes to my mind are the various attempts on the European level at creating interoperability between a mobile payment scheme. When these schemes span different currencies, a TIPS cross-currency service could certainly play a role. A case in point from the Nordics is VIPS, which is a Norwegian mobile payment solution, which is also used in Denmark and Finland, and since this autumn also in Sweden. Earlier this year, VIPS started to offer cross-border payments across the Nordics, which is a promising initiative in a region that is already highly integrated. It's also a fairly costly initiative, it's turned out, as VIPs need to rely on the card infrastructure for this specific service. Our understanding is that processing could be improved when a TIPS cross-currency service goes live. Of course, that will depend on the participating bank signing up for the service and some development needed at VIPs, and the banks will also be required. But the rails are there, and the rest will be then up to the mobile payment schemes and the banks. So that's some examples of concrete use cases, and we could see other initiatives along the same lines as well. Thank you, Dimitri.
Thank you, Christina, indeed. And maybe now another question to Peter. So you are not yet settling in TIPS. This will come in April next year. And also you are very deeply involved in the cross-currency. In your view, what are the benefits that the market participants can gain in joining the cross-currency? But maybe as well, what would be the potential challenges for that?
We don't hear you, Peter. You're muted.
I don't know if...
There you are.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I hope it's better now. Sorry. Okay, so let me start with saying that for us at the Central Bank, it really is about reaping the full benefits of having joined the T2 and the TIPS platform, that we want to also make use of this TIPS cross-currency service. And just to start one place with the benefits, I think for the Danish banks, the benefit will be the opportunity to actually use the accounts, the liquidity that is in the Danish kroner segment of the TIPS platform, the TIPS DKK, to also make cross-border instant payments. So in this setup, you really wouldn't need to set up traditional corresponding banking relations, and you wouldn't need to keep liquidity in the foreign currencies that is in the service. You just need to have a arrangement with the cross-currency PSPs to get the FX rate quote, and then to be part of the TIPS cross-currency service. And to point at another benefit, it really is that, for the Danish banks, that they will be able to use the TIPS DKK and the TIPS cross-currency service in meeting the requirements of the instant payment regulation that will come into effect in 2027 for Danish banks, and will require them to be able to receive and send instant payment in euros if they already handle credit transfers in Europe. So this is really important, we think, and instant payments in euro, that will probably be the largest share of cross-border instant payment for Danish banks, given the size of the euro area. And I think it's important to also be attentive to this possible use case. And I also want to mention again, the advantage and benefits for end users from having this cross-currency service. We think it will make it more available for end users, and it's important for Danish citizens and companies, and will be a sort of a step forward compared to where we are today. And then you also asked about challenges. Are there no challenges in this? And there is challenges and work to be done. I want to mention one challenge here, which is the reachability issue, and I think it has also popped up in some of the questions in the chat. It seems. I think this is a joint responsibility to address this issue, and I'm quite optimistic about it. I think in Denmark there's a good tradition in finding common solutions, common approaches, and we are in a good dialogue with the Danish banking sector. So it's clear that when all join, the benefits will be higher, and that's important to have a focus on that. So I'll stop here. Thank you, Dimitri.
Yes, thank you, Peter. I think 20 minutes is very short, but I think we just have the time for me to ask you maybe one last question, and then we can be short on that. How do you see the TIPS cross-currency evolve over time and contributing further to the enhancement of cross-border payments? This is, as many of us mentioned already, this is very topical in the G20. We know the service as it is currently shaped, but how would you see that evolve over time? Maybe Christina, you can start.
Thank you. So that's going to be very interesting to follow, of course, and that connects a lot to what Peter mentioned about the reachability aspect. And I think we should be clear about the realistic trajectory for the TIPS cross-currency service. So that I would foresee payment service providers to join the service successively. That is expecting a massive take-up from go live in October is not very probable, I believe, but that the service definitely has the potential to radically change cross-border payments, even though not from day one. It will be an evolution rather than a revolution, I believe, and I'm sure that this is a direction that payments is going in. That being said, I hope that many of you at this focus session will consider to be among the ones to break the ice, to be the first ones. That's important. And with the network effects that are at play, this requires a certain effort and commitment. I understand that. At the same time, taking into account how this service will impact corresponding banking relationships, there could also be some early mover advantages, which I know that you are fully aware of. And then maybe to conclude from my side, we have great expectations for this service, which we see as a possible future gateway for instant payments across currencies. We think that the service could fill an important gap in the infrastructure for cross-border payments. I hope that you see it in the same way and that you will connect to the service for the benefit of your customers. So thank you for that.
Yes, thank you indeed, Christina. And Peter, on your side?
Well, let me start with just agreeing with Christina on the way forward, and we know that it's an ambitious timeline, and perhaps not everything needs to happen on October 1st, 2025, but really getting the process started will be important. So, and let me just also recall that, we'll start out with the euro area, with Sweden, those currencies already in there. Norway expected to join, hopefully Iceland at some point. So really for Danish banks, for Danish customers, the possibility of reaching neighboring countries quite soon with this service is really there. So that should be a positive also for citizens, for companies. And you also mentioned in the introduction the sort of wider perspectives of getting further into the world later on. I think those perspectives are also important to keep in mind. So thanks a lot from my side, and I hope this session has sort of given a bit more insight into our thinking in this. Thanks.
Yes, I'm sure it did. And again, we are reaching here the end of this Fireside exercise. And thank you, Christina and Peter. I think we have already, it was wise, Eileen, from you to wait before we take questions, because I guess, for instance, as you mentioned, Peter, the element of, or Christina, don't recall, the element of reachability, actually both of you mentioned it, the element of reachability is really core to what we do. I briefly mentioned previously that we had found the right measures to reach a very good level of reachability within the Eurozone, and we are indeed working towards defining the right measures to, if not have a full reachability, at least have a good and increasing reachability when we launch this new service. Elena, I see that we are running a bit behind. Should we move
exactly.
on?
You know, I'll come after you if you don't keep keep well. So thank you, Dimitri. No, I think you're right. We are exactly just a little bit behind schedule here. So I want to agree with you that maybe we would thank the Peter Storgård or Christine Weishammer for their participation. There are a lot of questions popping in here, and some of the ones that you picked up, Peter, exactly on the reachability. There's a number of people also asking questions about currencies. So there are a number of questions in there. But I hope we will be able to answer those in the coming 2 sessions, because we are going more and more into the technical details as the session progresses. So maybe we hold some of the questions, unless, Dimitri, you want to pick up on some of them here. But I think we will probably be responding to them in the 2 sessions to come. There is one funny one that maybe you would just want to clarify here a little bit, Dimitri. Maybe it's also because we started very broad perspective, and then now we're starting to speak more about the service that we're implementing in TIPS. And some people are asking questions here about currencies and what type of cross-currency payments we will be doing. But maybe, Dimitri, you just want to specify a little bit here that, of course, with the work we're discussing right here is the service within TIPS, meaning the services that are onboarded.
Eileen, if you allow, because I just quickly, I'm
you're scanning.
I'm speaking, I'm reading. I was reading a bit the questions, and there is one that I would like to still cover, because I'm not sure it will come later. I agree with you. Many of the questions will be answered by Andrea and Jean that are coming later. The one on fraud detection, AML and screening, yep. I believe is the second element. The first one is reachability, and we are well aware that this is an important element to deliver a good service, and we'll be working on that. Obviously, the elephant in the room is also what it means in terms of fraud detection, AML and screening. So the message I want to pass here is that we are well aware that this is one of the challenges when we talk about cross-currency instant payments. The good news probably is that we talk about an economic area where there is already a lot of alignments, also from the regular perspective between the Eurozone, Denmark, Sweden, in the future Norway probably. There is already quite an alignment in terms of regulatory frameworks. But the point I want to make here is that this is obviously the second element on which we need to work to make sure that this is a success in the end. So I wanted to cover that, Eileen, because I'm not sure it will come later in the session, but I would leave it here now. Yeah, thank you.
Super. Thank you so much. So big thanks to Dimitri. You will be hanging on, I hope, but there's very big thanks to Christina and Peter for their involvement. Very nice to have both of you on board here today. I think it's a super interesting initiative coming, and especially also up for the Nordic market. So thanks for joining us today. And then we're going to move on to the second part of today's session, where we're going to dive more into the technical side of this cross-currency service in TIPS. And for that, I'm really happy to have Andrea Di Martini from Banca d'Italia with us here today. So you are TIPS functional manager. So I want to hand over to you, and then you can take us through the more technical aspects of this new service. So here you go.
Thank you very much, Eileen, and good afternoon, everyone, also from my side. And first of all, thank you for inviting me to this focus session. I hope you can hear me well. So in my presentation, I'm going to be talking about the proposed cross-currency settlement model for all the TIPS hosted currencies, focusing in particular on some functional and technical dimensions. So starting already with the next slide, the idea here is to refer to a specific initiative that falls under the change request TIPS 65. This is the regular change and management process we have in TIPS in order to introduce new features. And in particular, with this change request, we are introducing what we defined the enhanced link transaction settlement model. What does it mean in practice? It's a settlement model through which, for all the transactions involving TIPS hosted currencies, we ensure complete end-to-end instantaneity of settlement by splitting the end-to-end cross-currency transaction into two single currency legs, which are settled individually following a payment versus payment approach, meaning that either both of them will be settled or none of them will be settled in order to avoid credit risk. So this model offers, in particular, to the payer the certainty that the funds are going to be delivered to the ultimate beneficiary if everything goes well along the chain in a matter of seconds. And therefore, it is optimizing a bit the concept of the one leg out flow, in which settlement occurs on the two involved jurisdictions in a strict sequence, one after the other. And ultimately, the model will be also based on the same message schema definitions that are designed under the perimeter of the one leg out functionality that is specifically developed for the euro, but our message experts extended a bit the logic in order to be currency neutral. So in a way that can be used also for the non-euro currencies hosted in TIPS right now. In the second, I think the next slide, we are deep diving into the initial stages of the payment generation. And here I'm describing a bit what is going to happen in the customer to PSP space. This is a bit outside the inter-PSP domain, which is relevant for the CSM, but still, in order to set the expectation, it's important to define what are the fields that would be required in order to create a well-formed cross-currency message into TIPS. So for this reason, the payer, first of all, should trigger a cross-currency payment initiation by selecting an amount and a target currency. This step would entail some exchange rate negotiation, for example, between the originating PSP and the selected intermediary who is supposed to offer some rates for the specific corridor. And upon confirmation from the payer, the originating PSP will submit the transaction to TIPS. So it will formally send a PAX8 in a, let's say, specific format that I will describe a bit later on. And in the next slide, you can see in a list of fields, and here you can recognize some of the fields which are already there in the domestic transaction, but some other, they are not part of the EPC SEPA credit transfer, or not even at the moment in the Nordic credit transfer instant. But those fields are required in order to have a successful end-to-end settlement between different jurisdictions. So first of all, instead of one single amount and currency, we would need two fields. One for the source currency and a second one for the amount in the destination currency. And on top of that, there will be an additional tag reporting the FX rate that should be applicable for that specific transaction. Furthermore, the intermediaries will play a key role for the end-to-end settlement, because the debtor agent and the creditor agent will report respectively the PSPs managing the accounts of the payer and the payee, so in two different jurisdictions, whereas the two intermediaries, following the naming convention of the one leg out scheme produced by the EPC, we talk about the exit leg PSP or entry leg PSP in the corresponding currencies. Those are the actors who are on one end receiving funds in the source currency, and in the other jurisdiction providing funds in the target currency to the ultimate beneficiary. There are some technical fields required just to have a smooth management of the end-to-end flow. And here in particular, we had to introduce a specific clearing system code just to mark the direction of the transaction. Because according to the implementation guidelines that we used as a reference, we built a superset of XSDs, including, let's say, both directions, either outbound from one currency to the other, and also inbound direction for the destination currency who is receiving the cross-currency payment. So for this reason, the clearing system code is in a way driving the system to take the appropriate decision when a cross-currency payment lands on the system. Moving ahead, here you can find a visual representation of the full model that we proposed with the CR TIPS 65. Mainly to explain the pillars behind this model. We have, let's say, an end-to-end transaction, as I mentioned, that is split into two sub-transactions, each of them treated as a single currency transaction. There is an orchestration required when moving the payment from, let's say here, the blue part to the yellow part of the diagram. So the two components which are dealing with the settlement of the specific currency, they need to talk with each other to make sure that as a basic functionality, the payment that is crossing the jurisdiction is following the rules which are expected on the other side in terms of ISO 20022 messages. So the main difference here compared to the one leg out is the fact that the payments would entail a reservation of funds on both jurisdictions, and only after the ultimate beneficiary confirms the willingness of settling the transaction, the two sub-transactions will be settled in a all or nothing mode. That's why you can see step 9 here in this diagram is replicated a number of times just to explain that all these steps are simultaneous, are managed in a simultaneous way. Moving to the next slide, just focus on how the liquidity will be transferred along the chain, because this is of course just an example, taking as a scenario a euro payment targeting a Swedish krona beneficiary. So in that case, you can see the transaction is split into two different legs. One that is transferring funds from the debiting account to the account of the intermediary on the euro side, and another transaction still in TIPS, moving funds from the intermediary on Swedish krona side to the ultimate beneficiary. Some realignment in terms of liquidity would be necessary just for the two intermediaries to exchange funds with each other. So there should be an agreement between them in order to make sure that this transaction can be settled effectively. The next slide, I think I mentioned already this need to orchestrate the two transactions. And I mentioned also at the very beginning the reference to enhanced linked transaction model. So you may wonder, enhanced compare what? Basically, this model is coming from a further refinement of a previous model that was called simply linked transaction model, that was leaving to the cross-currency PSP the role of orchestrating, let's say, out of band, out of the system itself, the two legs of the end-to-end transaction. We try to reduce a bit the complexity, concentrating this function into a specific component within TIPS, and this is especially working very fast for the TIPS hosted currency, but nothing prevents to reuse the same component also for the interlinking between TIPS and other systems. And in very simple words, this is a kind of mapping table that is going to be introduced in TIPS, just to make sure that whatever is not present at the level of the messages can be derived from the mapping table in order to, let's say, bridge the gap between the two systems. What type of gap can be there in the system or in the message? Sorry. Well, first of all, according to the one leg out scheme, if you look at the various tags, one of the two intermediaries, in particular the entry leg PSP, so the intermediary in the destination jurisdiction, is an optional field. So in theory, the message can be sent to the CSM without that information. But still, when it comes to the settlement layer, TIPS would need this type of information in order to transfer the funds, as I described before, from the entry leg PSP to the ultimate beneficiary. And that's how we control this gap and, let's say, we fill the missing information. This is one aspect, of course. There is another point that will be relevant for the mapping table, which is the selection of the settlement model. Because as you may know, and Dimitri also mentioned in his presentation before, via the phase approach, we are going to introduce the one leg out settlement flow already in June next year, which means, for example, a pair of currencies can be let's say, used to trigger a cross-currency payment already since June. When the enhanced linked transaction model will enter into force, there should be a decision whether moving the corridors into this mapping table. Of course, all the TIPS hosted currencies will be the first candidates to be part of the mapping table. So for example, Euro versus DKK or DKK versus SEK will be captured in the mapping table. And that is what exactly I was referring to. So the mapping table will have as a first role a decision point whether the payment will be settled according to the one leg out scheme. For example, if no row is matching the pair of currency in the message by looking into the mapping table, or to go via the enhanced link transaction model, as I will explain let's say in the next slide. But before going to the examples, maybe it's just good to have a visual representation on how the TIPS mapping table will look like. Besides a number of technical fields that I will not describe in much detail, of course, we would need some distinguished name and some network provider information just to allow the transfer of the messages from one component to the other. What is really relevant in terms of cross-currency settlement are the two parts on the left and right-hand side of the table. On the left-hand side, as I mentioned, there is a first step of validation, just checking whether the pair of currencies which is there in the payment message can be settled through the enhanced link transaction model. Secondly, if there is a gap of information in the message, and here I'm referring to the entry leg PSP, which is not present in the message, then the system will look for a match between the entry leg PSP and the exit leg PSP that we can find in the message, because the latter is a mandatory field according to the one leg out scheme. So to give you an example with the first scenario in the next slide, if we have a cross-currency transaction between Swedish krona and euro, you can see a very compact representation of this message on the left-hand side. Basically, we have 4 players. We have the originator and the beneficiary PSP. Then we have what are defined as instructing agent and instructed agent in the message. The first one, the instructed agent is mandatory, whereas the instructing is optional. But still, there might be cases where the instructing agent is there in the message since the beginning, because the originator PSP received from his counterpart, from his intermediary, the information. So if we have such type of information, we will simply look up for the currency pair in the mapping table to make a decision on the settlement model. But we don't need to verify whether there is a specific row mapping the entry and the exit leg PSP. So for this scenario, it's sufficient to go through the step 1 to make the appropriate decision. The mapping function will simply do some basic transformation of the messages. As you may notice, the message on the right-hand side is the one that should pop up in the destination jurisdiction. And one thing to notice is that the two currencies are swapped simply because the settlement layer will always look in order to set the single currency sub-transaction to a specific field. That's why this swap is required. But besides this, there is no gap to fill in the message. We can have already all the debiting and crediting side information to settle the transaction. The next example, this is a bit more complex. In the next slide, we have same scenario in terms of pair of currencies, but the instructing agent field is not informed since the beginning. And this is possible due to the optional tag defined at the level of PAX8. So the first step will exactly look like as I described before. So by finding the currency pair SEK and euro in the mapping table, this will lead the system to process the instant payment cross currency according to the enhanced link transaction model. But in order to do so, there will be an additional piece of information, which is the entry leg PSP. And this can be derived through a second access into the mapping table. And as you can see here, there is a match between the exit leg PSP present in the message and a given entry leg PSP. So what the mapping function will do is simply to use this entry leg PSP when the payment on the destination currency is generated internally. And this will be the intermediary to whom the PAX8 will be sent for acceptance before triggering the whole process on the destination currency. I think we reach with the next slide the end of my presentation, and I just wanted to convey the message that in general for tips for any release we publish, besides the user detail functional specification, also all the XSDs, the schema definition for the XMLs into my standard repository. And for cross currencies, we made even an exception. So we anticipated a bit the publication of those messages. So if you log in into my standard and you look for the version XCY of PAX8, PAX2, and PAX28, you will see exactly how the XSDs are structured, all the usage guidelines, and you can make comparisons, for example, between the domestic flow and the cross-currency flow. I think this is it from my side. I hope I stayed in
super
time.
good time, Andrea. Excellent. No, thank you so much. A lot of information here, so everyone, shake your heads and make it all fall in. Because you've been talking now a lot, so we're just gonna, let everyone else do a little bit of work too, while Andrea takes 30 seconds of break. So we're just gonna show you a QR code on the screen, and everyone who's now just listening until now can just scan the QR code here, and then just, go through those little questions that are gonna pop up on your screen and answer those. We will take those into consideration here on the back end. So with that, so everyone has something to do here, and then we gave, and they are like 30 seconds break. And then there's a number of questions popping up. I think you tackled a lot of them. So thanks so much for that. There's a few questions about, maybe you can explain a little bit how we see this FX rates and how that's going to work within the model. Can you just, say a few words on that?
Yes, thank you very much, Eileen. Indeed, the FX rate, let's say, trading is, let's say, a preliminary action even before sending the payment through the settlement layer, simply because according to the one leg out method specification, this is part of the mandatory fields that the CSM should receive. In terms of central system, TIPS will not perform any specific validation, but it will allow the intermediaries to make an FX rate check on a payment by payment, meaning that there should be an agreement at the very beginning between originator and exit leg PSP on the value to be inserted in the payment message. Then the payment will be submitted to TIPS, and TIPS will forward the same payment to the intermediary for validation. And only after the intermediary will accept the payment, then the payment will go through the next steps. And the same would apply also for transparency reasons for the entry-leg PSP on the other endpoint, so that everybody will rely on the same level of information in the message end-to-end.
Terrific. Thank you so much. And I just want to, clarify here that like we do for all other of our services, whenever we are going to be publishing documents also on this cross-currency service, of course, we will add all those to the website, so you will all be able to find them. We will update you in our newsletter and in our LinkedIn channel. So there would be plenty of opportunities to, follow and read on the work and, keep being updated on this. So I just want to, clarify this. This is the first session we're doing on it, so there will be lots more to come on the cross-currency work. So with that, I just want to say thank you so much to you and Andrea for joining us today. It was a great pleasure to have you on board and to talk about the settlement model in this new cross-currency part of TIPS. So thanks so much for that. I'm sure we'll be having you on in a future focus session as well. So thanks for joining us today. And again, we have the email here on in case you have questions you want to ask, just shoot them in. And for the last part of our session today, I want to bring in my colleague, Sean Clement. You will guide us through the last bit on the work ahead and how we want to involve the market in the work to come. So Sean, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Aline, and good afternoon, everyone. Bear with me, indeed, you have received a lot of information of why we are doing it, what we are doing it, but actually you might think everything is done and dusted, but it's not yet fully finalized, and we have some work to do all together. So that's why we have put those slides to explain the few next steps that are ahead of us, and also as well screening while the people were writing the question. I'll try to answer some of them directly during the speech. So if we go to the next slide, it's just a reminder. I think Christina rightfully reminded us that we are here explaining how the TIPS platform will be set up for cross-currency. But it goes beyond setting up of the platform. If we want to have a cross-currency service, we need to involve more participants. That's why we really value the participants, the market participants, the payment service provider, and we will continue doing that with the cross-currency setup to ensure that we have a successful European cross-currency service. What does it mean? Since the Governing Council has given it green light to continue the implementation that we just discussed about, and Andrea gave you some very technical insight about it. That's what we want to do. We want to involve all relevant participants to discuss on how to set it up properly. For that, on the next slide, we would like to officially launch today a call for expression of interest together with the European Central Bank, but also the National Central Bank involved, Denmark's National Bank and Sveriges Riksbank, to open the market participants to this call for expression of interest. It is addressed to all current and future participants of those corridors that we just presented. So can be TIPS Riksins, TIPS DKK, Riksins DKK participants. So it's really opening a call for expression of interest to all the PSP mostly that want to test this new cross-currency setup. We have highlighted during the previous presentation different roles, like the entry-leg PSP, the exit-leg PSP. Andrea as well showed the different role in the setup of these two, let's say, two-step approach of the currency. You might want to play one or several roles in that testing period or testing the setup. We really would like to open largely to all market participants to apply for this expression of interest, so we can test as many use cases as possible. The objective of it, of course, is that we gather commitment from the market participants that will carry out the testing activities, defining the use cases with us but also, let's say, performing those testing campaigns. So it's really a large call for expression of interest. It starts now. I will explain when do we intend to finish, but you can start thinking about the role that you want to play in that cross-currency setup, either or entry like PSP, FX provider. We will discuss about the additional functions that we need in that cross-currency setup, but officially we are launching this call for expression of interest to start thinking more into the details of the cross-currency setup. On the next slide, I go a bit more in detail of what will be the activities with the market during this call for expression for interest. We want to have detailed discussion. We will set up different fora so we can precisely discuss about some of the questions that I have seen as well on the chat, which are absolutely relevant. Beyond the reachability, the reciprocity, we need to discuss precisely how the FX provision will be made by the participants, how to use it, how to insert it into the PAX 8, as reminded previously. We have to discuss as well, because we are across currency, meaning across jurisdictions, the regulatory and compliance arrangements, for example, for anti-money laundering, for screening, and maybe give a clear definition and a joint definition of the roles and responsibilities of the different actors. So we will again set up different fora so we can have those discussions with those who will have applied for this call for expression of interest. Even more important, once we have details within those discussions, the roles, the responsibility, maybe the use cases that we want to test, we will have to jointly organize those testing campaigns. For those who have followed the history of the target services on our website, or maybe as a direct participant, you know that we put a large emphasis on those testing campaigns, or those community readiness as well. We will have dedicated testing campaign to do this very interesting testing of cross-currency setup. We target 2, maybe 3 dedicating testing campaign. Again, we will fine-tune the scope and the timing with the market participants, but we really would like to, for all the market participants, to have such testing campaign and discuss, of course, potential go-live dates after those testing campaigns. So keep in mind 2, maybe 3 dedicated testing campaign before or right before the go-live of the service. You will find in the website the details of the TIPS CR65. We will communicate the precise go-live dates, but you can imagine it is very much linked to some other regulation that we have on the TIPS platform. So we will show you a tentative timeline right after. We mentioned that it's the start of the cross-currency journey for the TIPS platform. It's certainly not the end. Therefore, with all those market participants with whom we will have those detailed discussions, we will discuss, of course, about the potential future enhancements of the platform. And the front runners or the first movers will also be involved in the discussion related to potential future enhancement. We don't pretend having everything on the first run for every scenario. However, there is a core, let's say, cross-currency setup, or a minimum viable product, sometimes it is called, that we will need to set up. But we are already open for the future enhancement of the platform that will be developed later on. We want to discuss as well with all market participants those potential future enhancements and think ahead about the evolution of the cross-currency setup for TIPS. What precisely will be part of this call for expression of interest? In the next slides, we detail a bit the package that will be made available to those market participants. At least it's a non-exhaustive list, but it will contain all the technical and functional documentation as part of the CR, as part of the role definition, for the participants to understand their role and how to implement the cross-currency setup in the testing platform. A high-level explanation of the role and responsibility. We started again to dig into the detail of the entry leg PSP, the exit leg PSP, and the FX provider, where it shall be set up and where it will be inserted. That will be part of the package as well. As part already of this expression of interest, we want to have a high-level testing strategy. I started to touch upon the 2-3 testing campaigns. We'll give a bit more details and give some insights on the testing objective of those testing campaigns. We have started gathering some questions either via bilateral discussion with some of the CSM or PSP. We will continue, for example, with all the very interesting questions that you have put together today in this focus session in joint documents and providing, of course, the answers. So you can already reflect or have some ideas on how to participate to this testing campaign. So the Q&A will be joined to the package before you apply for the call for expression of interest. In order to simplify the application, we will also make available a template of a letter of intent. Sending to us this letter of intent will signal us your intention to actively contribute to this call for expression of interest and being an active participant in the testing campaign and later on for the go live of the cross-currency setup in TIPS. Concretely, some key dates on the next slide that we want to share with you. As I mentioned earlier, today we are launching officially the call for expression of interest to all those market participants who would like to have an active role in the setup, in the testing of the cross-currency in TIPS. Still this month, we will gather all the background information and make them available on our website. Many of you are already familiar on the payments side, on the payments dedicated section of the ECB website. For sure, under the TIPS section of that payments and market infrastructure session, you will soon find out all the package of the background information for this expression of interests. We want to run this, or to give you a bit of time to think about the roles or the roles that you want to play during this testing campaign. And the deadline that we have set up for the call for expression of interest is set until end of February. We still need to prepare for the testing campaign that will be run during the year of 2025. Therefore, we have set up an end date for the application. We can be a bit more flexible, of course, by 1 or 2 weeks, but somehow by end of February, we want to know whom wants to apply and participate actively. And throughout 2025, as the last bullet point, we will have set up those fora I mentioned earlier, initiated the discussion, clarify wherever it's needed, the roles, the responsibility, the technicalities, the functionality that will be implemented, as well the testing strategy in view of the testing campaign. And that's the part on the last slide, what we intend to do for this testing campaign. I mentioned, so let's read it on the anti-natural way, but let's have a look at the right-hand side first. The deployment on the production platform will be aligned. You know that in October 2025, we have a very specific release date, which coincides with the deployment of the instant payment regulation. So we will have the release deployment on the 5th of October, which means that once we have by mid-March the specification for the release scoping, you can imagine that between July and early September, this is where we will focus all our effort on those testing campaigns. I mentioned 2-3 targeted testing campaigns on the cross-currency setup. That's what we currently target. Again, it's a lot of work ahead of us. Not everything is written yet, and we count on all the market participants. I am sure for those open questions, as reminded by Peter and Christina, that we will find a solution. Don't worry about that, and count on us to coordinate the efforts with all market participants, and that we will have not only successful testing during the summer, but a successful go live of the cross-currency service at the end of the deployments. I'm looking at my colleagues. Ellen, that is the end of the presentation of the work ahead.
Excellent. So it looks like we're going to be really busy, but do not worry, everybody, because we're going to keep talking to you. As Sean just said, there will be the call for expression of interest, and you may already think like, okay, how am I going to find information about that? We will be sharing information about all this work ahead. And then you may think, oh, how do I find it? You find it by following us. Just here, we're just going to show this slide to you. So, grab your little cell phones and take a snap of this. If you're not already following us, you can either do it on X. You can do it in our LinkedIn group, ECB Market Infrastructure and Payments. We have a group here where we really push out all the latest news. And this is also where we will be pushing out the material that Sean just discussed about the call for expression of interest. So follow that, or the newsletter, which is another great platform where you get it straight into your inbox so that you're not going to miss anything. So just to have that clear, you will get everything directly to where you want it to follow up. But we have a few questions still that we want to just quickly pick up on. I also have a few for Dimitri, so maybe we want to switch between the two of you, but don't leave me, Sean, because I'm sure there might also be a few questions that we want to address to you. But Dimitri, if you're still around, I just want to ask you a few questions that has been popping up a number of times here, so maybe you can clarify. There you are, perfect. So there's a few questions. So excellent. Just to make sure I ask questions that can be responded to. There's a few questions about funding the account in TIPS. So maybe you want to, talk a little bit about the funding, so liquidity basically on the TIPS.
Yes, indeed. I saw the several questions on that indeed, and it's true that the T2 opening hours, you know that the TIPS accounts are funded from T2. And when it comes to the Riksbank from their own RTGS system so far, it's true that the opening hours are not as wide as what we have for TIPS. Well, this is a situation that we have already today without the cross currency. So the situation is not very different before or after we implement the cross currency. What I want to share here is that this is indeed becoming, the more we have the uptake of instant payments, the more this is becoming topical. And we have already started some thinking on how we could bridge the gap, and especially during the weekend. I believe one of the elements of concerns is the weekend, of course. But I would again not strictly link this to the cross-currency file. It is more, from my perspective, the uptake of instant payments, which will justify that we rethink probably the funding of the TIPS accounts and inevitably the opening hours of T2. So I hope this is answering the questions. I saw several in the chat indeed on that.
Exactly.
And that's a very relevant consideration, of course. Yeah.
Super. Then there's a few other questions, Dimitri, maybe on the interoperability with other clearing and settlement mechanisms, and maybe referred a little bit to this OLO scheme, so one leg out.
Yes, indeed. I mean, the one of the questions that we have, and not only in the chat, by the way, today, but that's a question that is floating in there for several weeks or months, is the interoperability for other Euro CSMs in these cross-currency projects. I mentioned earlier in the session that we have implemented the reachability measures in TIPS so that we provide the necessary reachability for every PSP in settling in euro independently of the choice of ACH. Of course, when we think about cross-currency, we don't want to break this. So what we want is to have a model, and this is supported in the settlement model that Andrea explained. We actually intend to support that any PSP, active with the euro currency would have access to this cross-currency service. And this again, independently of the ACH or the CSM that was chosen. So what I can share as well, I did not mention that earlier, but we have already entered into discussions with the other CSMs to see how to make that happen. So our intention is obviously not to lose the very high level of reachability that was achieved from 2022 onwards.
Super, thank you. And then there's maybe a few questions that also popped up a number of times on currencies. I think within TIPS, I think people are referring to the cross currency, but I think there's two aspects. There's the currencies that the work we're discussing now, which is the cross currency within TIPS, and then there was the work that we explained a bit in the beginning, which is beyond, so cross border payment. So do you want to say a few words on that, maybe?
Yeah, I saw that question as well, Eileen, on the and especially, I mean, obviously, when we talk about cross currency, the elephant in the room is the corridor with the US dollar, of course. What I can share is that we are in close contacts with the colleagues from the Federal Reserves. I mean, you've heard about FedNow. What we see is that there is a mutual interest. It's not only us knocking at the door, but there is a mutual interest for this. But it's fair to say that until recently, FedNow was very much focused on the launch of their service. We hope that this will change over time, but it's unfortunately a bit too early to come up now with precise views on that. We believe this will come over time. And by the way, the phase 3, as we defined it, we mentioned UPI and India. This is not a closed set of bilateral links or multilateral links that we want to establish. I'm sure that there will be other cases materializing, and maybe that will be other occasions to have more focused sessions. Yeah.
Exactly. So we see your work ahead of us here. So thanks for that, Dimitri. So I think that sort of wraps up the main questions of today, unless you found something in addition, Sean, that you think we have to answer. I think we've covered a lot. There's a lot of very specific questions in here. They will be answered in the time ahead. There's a lot of work to be done, like Sean said and stressed at the beginning. It's only the beginning. There'll be much more to come on this. So, keep following us. Stay on their journey here, because it's going to be exciting, and it is moving fast. You saw the timeline ahead. So I think that's it for us on that. But before we close completely, as I mentioned at the beginning, your feedback is essential. So just use those 30 seconds to just quickly scan the QR code and just answer those questions. And then I'll just bring Dimitri back in case he has anything he wants to say about the time ahead. But fill in the survey. It's really, really going to be none of your time, but it would really improve our events. We want to do them for you. So the more you can tell us, the better we can do next time. So just use that time to give us some feedback. And then, Dimitri, unless, I will hand over to you, and you can just, close up for today. Very busy morning or afternoon, I think we can say.
No, this is fine, and thank you, Eileen, indeed. So, well, as you just mentioned here, this focus session is now slowly but surely coming to an end. Well, again, thanks a lot for the many questions that were raised during the session. We have tried to answer. I feel too little. I mean, we did not provide an answer to all the questions, but don't be worried. We will take all those questions, and that will for sure help us shaping the documentation and also feeding the dialogue as we want to do in the coming month. So maybe let me just remind a bit the purpose of the discussion today. What we wanted to do was to share with you on the cross-currency initiative for which we got green light from the Governing Council. So when we get such green light, we have to act upon that. And this is a serious initiative now. To recall briefly, one dimension is the ability to execute instant payments between the TIPS hosted currencies. That's the phase 2. It is planned for a technical rollout in October 2025. From the many questions we heard today, I would agree that there is more work to do in terms of reachability, in terms of fraud detection, and so on. So there is still a lot of work ahead of us. And I would also take the words of caution that Peter and Christina brought during our fireside questions, that we will need to we will need to start and then to increase the reachability over time. The second dimension in our strategy is the interlinking with other fast payment systems. We mentioned India. I briefly mentioned the US dollar and FedNow without giving you a very clear picture on that. I'm conscious. So this interlinking with other fast payment system will come slightly later than the phase 2. That's phase 3. We target now end of 2026 or the beginning of 2027. And we will cover again both the multilateral and the bilateral interlinking. I noticed that this session was, like the others, very well attended. We had on a constant basis more than 500 people attending the WebEx, and I understood more in the live stream. Again, the questions that you raised will not be lost. They will be taken on board and will help us shaping the questions and the documentation, the FAQs and the documentation that we plan to deliver. On the agenda, we had at the beginning, Ulrich and I giving you some insights on the purpose and the roadmap. We had a great discussion with Christina and from the Central Bank of Sweden and Peter from the Central Bank of Denmark on the strategic nature of this initiative from their perspective, but I can say this is the same from the Euro area perspective. And again, a big thank for them for joining today. Then we had Andrea quite eloquently sharing some insights on the settlement model. Andrea likes to talk about it because he is actually the one who has been designing it. And again, thank you, Andrea, for being there. And last but not least, we had Jean explaining how active we will be in terms of market outreach. We are hopeful that the call of interest that was formulated today will trigger your attention, and that this will help us shaping the rollout of the service in collaboration with in close collaboration with the markets. So maybe the last word would be there is no focus session without the good support of the backstage team. Again, thank you, Eileen, and the team for the good organization. And my last word will be that I hope that you found this event useful. There will be more, but I hope you found this one already useful, and I wish you a good afternoon. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Dimitri. And goodbye to everybody from here. Remember to fill in the quick feedback survey and follow us on the different channels we have so you can stay up to date about what's going to happen in the future. So thanks from the ECB and have a nice afternoon. Bye-bye.